So this week I published a piece on Substack about looking at my own activity data after moving back from Sheffield to Ohio. My phone told me my steps were down, my flights climbed were down, and my calories burned were down. Red arrows were pointing in the wrong direction. And even though I'm the person who knows how to read these charts, who teaches this for a living, and who can recite the WHO physical activity guidelines off the top of my head, I'll be honest with you, the charts still felt pretty bad to look at. But the pieces about the evidence, training mode, and an old phrase that really turned out to be the most useful thing I had to say to myself. To everything, there is a season. And we know this in sports science, we know this in exercise science. We call it periodization. Athletes have a preseason, they have an in-season, and they have an off-season. They have recovery blocks. And we know that training load is meant to fluctuate. And the behavior science backs this up. Self-compassion outperforms shame. Focusing on facilitators or what's available to you right now produces movement. And focusing on the gap between where you were before, where you're at, and where you used to be kind of keeps us stuck at times. It's the same data, it's a different question, but it's a completely different next step. So this is the piece, and it ended up being the perfect setup for the conversation you're about to hear. Because the real question underneath all of this is one that I think the fitness industry really struggles with. It's, what does evidence-based actually mean when the chart, the program, or the coach, or the influencer in front of you is selling something else? My guest this week has been thinking about that question for over 20 years. If you've not read the article yet, the link is in the show notes. Read it before or after this episode. Either works. So today I am going to bring to you a guest that I've been really excited to talk with for a long time. His name is Dr. Darian Parker, and he has over 20 years of experience in the industry. Welcome to the Wellness in the Real World. I'm Dr. Natalie Grunwald. This is a podcast about what we think we know about health and well-being and what the evidence and experience actually tells us. Each episode, I sit down with someone who knows their corner of this world deeply, and we take a deep dive into a topic that matters. Today, we're talking about the fitness industry. It's an industry I've spent most of my career inside, one that I love, and also one that has complicated relationship with honesty, evidence, and the well-being of people it claims to serve. I wanted to have this conversation with someone who's seen that industry from every angle. My guest is Dr. Darian Parker. Darian has over 20 years of experience as a personal trainer, an educator, an executive, and a mentor in the fitness and well-being industry. He earned his PhD in sports education leadership with an emphasis in behavior modification from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. And he's worked with both academia, private clubs, served as a national director of fitness, and currently is a co-owner of Epic Leisure Management. He's also the host of Dr. Darian Parker podcast in the far side of fitness, so he knows that format well. Darian, welcome to Wellness in the Real World. Hi, Darian. How are you today? How are you doing?
Good, and yourself?
Good, thank you. Yeah, thank you so much
Doing
for
well.
joining me today. So I just gave a brief intro to everything that you do. Would you like to tell us anything about kind of what you're currently working on and what you're passionate about?
Yeah, I would say I always have a lot of different things going on, but I am the owner of Parker Personal Training, so I've been a trainer for 25 years, mostly full time, even while running a club and overseeing different regions for a company and a national director. I've always loved training, still do. I just had several sessions before starting this today, and then I've been a mentor, working in a group to build a mentorship program and a business for that. And then I am an adjunct professor at 3 different colleges. So always grading papers, doing lectures. So I've always been someone who believed in being a academic practitioner, someone who is in the academic realm and can live in that environment and teaches the up and coming people in health and wellness, but also works in the field on the ground level as well. And I really enjoy that.
Yeah, that's really great to hear. And I think that's kind of where we've had some previous conversations, and I felt really that I could relate to you. I call that a pracademic. You're applying that real world evidence you're applying real world experience in the academic setting and giving that real world, that academic evidence in the real world setting. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So one thing that, I know we've spoken about before is that you kind of have this really interesting journey from being an athlete to, the place you're at today, becoming a mentor for others. And we both kind of had this conversation about how there's issues with the current fitness industry. And, I know that's something that you're taking on right now. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about that from you.
Yeah. I mean, I think that anybody that knows me or has heard anything I've said on podcasts or individual conversations is that I have a very complicated relationship with the fitness industry, and I don't shy away from it. I don't believe in shying away from it. I think that part of any, how do I want to say this? I mean, I want to be genuine about this. I believe in transparency. I think that when you're part of something for whatever amount of time or you love it and you're really into it, it's okay to be critical about the thing you're in. And I think part of, a good study is good criticism and skepticism to keep, um, the industry on its toes. So I both really enjoy the fitness industry and both really think it's crazy at the same time. And I think most of the craziness is our own doing. Mostly is our own doing. I think it's human nature, human behavior is that the industry has been set up to be semi serious and a semi joke at the same time. And we're living in both of these worlds all the time. And I think that started really early on. I think if you look at it from, 40s, 50s, 60s, from Jack LaLanne all the way through Billy Blanks to social media now, there's an element, a thread of seriousness, but there's also an element of just pure, just ridiculousness to it, and marketing and sales and a cliff-based theory of like 90-day this, 30-day that, sell this
Yeah,
supplement. We're our own worst enemy. And so we
absolutely.
we can't seem to take ourselves seriously enough, but then we tend to always gravitate towards the entertainment, the lack of regulation, and just kind of the free for all aspect. And so we want our cake and eat it too, but then we
Absolutely.
also are afraid to criticize our own industry. I've never been afraid of that. I honestly don't care. I'm not
Hmm.
worried about it. And I think a
Hmm.
lot of progress comes from disruption and being honest about it. It's really both a great thing to be a part of and also kind of a joke at the same thing. If we want to be better, we have to like rid this joke label. And that means having hard conversations and being honest with the industry and pointing out when we're doing
Hmm.
stupid stuff for that. So I'm trying to do that
Yes.
in my own way. And through mentorship and through my work and teaching the next generation of fitness pros and letting them know what is credible, reputable information, what is just
Mm.
complete ridiculousness, and then being honest with my colleagues of like, hey, this isn't serving us well, this isn't
Mhm. Mhm.
aiding us in becoming a more reputable or industry. So I think I just have a very complicated relationship with it.
Well, I really respect that. There's a lot there that I want to unpack. And I think, like any good scientist, you're able to pick up the limitations of a study and you're able to pick out, where they've gone wrong and what's worked well. And I think that's really key. And I think we need more of that honesty and transparency. Similarly, I have a complicated relationship with it myself, but I think that a lot of people are afraid to speak what they believe. And I think it's really important. And I know that you've had this relationship from being an athlete to where you are today, and you've always been in the fitness industry. And I think being able to hold this, duality, these two mindsets together is really important and something that a lot of people are uncomfortable with, that you can love something, but also be critical of it.
Yes, most definitely. I think it's just an idea for people to, I think we often just think in human behavior that we have to just conform to the idea that I'm in this thing, so I must be supportive of everything related to it. And
Wow.
all that shows to me is that a lack of critical thinking. You could love something and be critical of it. It doesn't mean you have to be mean and malicious towards it, but
Yeah,
you could say, hey,
absolutely.
this isn't right. Right, this isn't, what we're doing is not good and we need to do better. But when we have this idea of like, we don't want to, no one wants to be outside of the system. You want to be in the system when you're in it. You don't want to ruffle any feathers. I just don't care about that. I think
Yeah.
maybe it's just because I'm in a different position in my life, and I understand maybe there's a privilege for that for me
Hmm.
over a
Hmm.
long period of time. But I was kind of like this in the beginning though too. I saw it for what it was in the beginning, and I just didn't have the voice that I had now, but I would certainly speak up about it. And I had
Yeah.
networking groups, and I would talk about it, and I would be disappointed. So I don't know. I guess I kind of take that back. I've been critical since the beginning, but I just think I never seen enough of that. And I think every time I've gone to a conference or I go to awards and different things like that, I see the industry for what it is, and I both love it and
Yes.
think it's just really strange and not great.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's really interesting that you kind of always had that courage and bravery to be, critical of the industry, but now you understand that you have this privilege, but it's certainly an earned privilege and you may be a voice and, a bigger platform for it. But, you've always had that within you to uphold integrity, it sounds like, and the science. And, having spent a long time in the UK and the US, I would say in the UK, the fitness industry is kind of following in the footsteps of the US, but the same patterns and the same things are emerging. So, I think that's really really interesting. One of my next questions is around, I know you spent over 25 years in the fitness industry. You picked up on this a little bit already, but I'd like to know, what do you think is the biggest thing that people get wrong about it? I'm sure we could talk about so many things, but what do you think is the biggest thing right now?
That people get wrong about it? Like when you say
No,
wrong,
about the
like
industry.
just the biggest thing people get wrong about it. I think it depends on what's the perspective. Is it people from outside the industry, in the industry? If I look at it from outside the industry, I think that the biggest thing people get wrong about it is that it's purely an aesthetic endeavor, and that they think that it's all about how you look. And but I also understand that too, because of the messaging. Like we have really poor messaging in fitness. Even
Absolutely.
when we say we're going to have better messaging, we still don't, and I think that's just a monetary thing. We always cater to what is sexy, what is
Yes.
entertaining, what is very capitalistic in nature, for that, what will drive the most money for that. Again, I think that's a product of our society, but that's also human
Absolutely.
behavior. We want to be entertained. We want to be,
Yeah.
in many ways, the fitness industry is somewhat like an accident in many ways. People pay attention to accidents and outrageous things.
Yes.
And
Yes.
really fitness is very boring. If you really think about it, it's pretty boring, because if you to do it well is not that it's not that thrilling. It's not that exciting to master the basics of it. So we have to make it more pumped up to make
Hmm.
people interested in it. And so all of our marketing and things are geared on that. It's all based off of it. So I think that the big mistake is we think that it's very physical. And really, I think in my time over 25 years, I think the physical part is actually takes a big back seat to the human part, the
Absolutely.
holistic part.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people coming into the business, they think about it primarily as a physical endeavor, when I would argue that that
Yes.
actually fades over time completely, and that it becomes about human relationships primarily for that. And then I think the people inside the industry, the biggest mistake is thinking that like the industry is going to last forever. I think that's one of the biggest
Mm.
misperceptions. Like this is a young industry. The modern version of
Yeah.
fitness has really been around in terms of more certification and things on a larger scale since the 1990s. This is nothing.
Mm.
We've been around nothing
Hmm.
compared to other professions. And I think to think that this is just always going to last, I think that's a mistake. I think it
Used
may
to.
not. I mean, we can't seem to get our stuff together. We make the same mistakes over and over and over every decade. We don't learn a thing half the time. This is my criticism of that.
Yeah.
We keep
Yeah.
making the same mistakes. We keep doing the same things. And I think a big part of it is that we have too much private equity firms coming into these larger corporations in our business who don't care about fitness. And then they influence different organizations, and they're not interested in the actual health and well being part of it. It's just the corporate side of it that they're interested
Yeah.
in buying, selling, getting out type of thing.
Yeah.
The destruction of all things always comes from focusing primarily on one thing, which is money for
Right.
that,
Yeah.
and overconfidence. So I think inside our industry, we should be very careful to think that this industry will always be around.
Wow. There is so much to unpack there. There's so many things, and I knew, because bringing in a true scientist, you're going to, say, well, who are we asking this question for? And there's so many different layers, and you are a systems thinker as well, so you're looking at it from a systems perspective, the root cause. So there's many things there, and we're not going to solve all of that in my conversation with you today. But I'm really happy to bring a lot of this to light, because I think it's stuff that we don't talk about. You said you've always been kind of aware of the shortcomings of the industry. Was there a moment or experience kind of within your early formation in this field that kind of crystallized this for you?
I would say just once I started working as a trainer way back in the day, now 25 years ago, I started that journey while I was finishing my master's degree. And I think it's interesting because while you're doing a graduate degree, and then I went on to get my doctorate, and I'm still training, doing this stuff, I'm learning about all the science, right? I'm learning heavily about the science, doing my dissertation. It's a huge undertaking. You're going through all this, all you do is research all the time, right? But on
Yeah.
the other side, I'm training people, I'm doing that work, I'm working in the business at a career college as well, and helping people to get certified. And I realized one thing: our education is not good in this. And
Hmm.
because I had a very unique education, that I was getting all this wonderful graduate level education, exercise physiology, right, exercise science, the really hardcore stuff, reading lots of research, meta-analyses, longitudinal studies, qualitative research. And I realized that my peers were getting none of this, who were trainers. They were just
Hmm.
going in, getting certified, and just working with people for that. And then I also realized that but on the one hand, most of the people that were teaching me were not practitioners.
Mm.
So they were
Yes.
teaching me just about the science. I had a real problem with that too.
Mm-hmm.
And then I realized, like, whenever I would train some of my professors down in the faculty of staff fitness facility where I first started, that they were just regular people and they had the
Yeah.
same issues and problems, and they
Yeah.
struggled to be active with exercise and do all the things that they were telling me. There's a big disconnect between being an academic and actually following through with your own advice on these things.
Absolutely.
So I started seeing the cracks in that initially, but I just thought initially the industry is too fragmented. And I would see other people who were going on to becoming exercise physiologists, or they'd be going to becoming nurses or physical therapists. And I realized that their pathway was much more solid, that through licensure, one test.
Yes.
And I thought, wow, becoming a trainer is too easy. Like anyone can do it.
Yes.
Like, I
Yeah.
don't think that's good for an industry when anybody could just roll into your job and do it. That to me created a sense of that there's too much variation. As a scientist, there's too much
Absolutely.
variability. And the research study, we can't have better quality control if we don't control some level of regulation. So all of a sudden we have a research study essentially that has out of control and has no parameters on it to control for lots of variation. That's the fitness industry. A terrible research study is what it is.
Well,
So that I
well,
realized very early.
yeah, the fitness industry is a terrible research study. I love that. And, I think that you realizing that early on, and I had a similar experience in the UK. Whilst I was doing my PhD, I obtained my different fitness qualifications and went through different courses, and then later on helped develop courses and accreditation at the university I was teaching. And I want to pick up on something you talked about earlier, where a lot of individuals would want to become personal trainers because they liked exercise or they like sports. But I always try to tell people, clients don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I think that pulls in kind of the human side of things. And you realize that people are just everyday people, and you've got to establish that trust and relationship before you can even get into the science behind training. And also the point about many academics who weren't actually working in the field, and you met many trainers that weren't actually had that academic or rigor within their training. And I think that makes, what you do very interesting, because you're able to see that disconnect. Not to say that everybody needs to do a PhD, or that every trainer, every academic needs to necessarily be a personal trainer, but they don't necessarily have the experience applying it. And that's one thing that I did enjoy in my work in the UK. And I think that we had some synergy on. So, you recognize that early on. And, you talked about a little bit the gap between what the fitness industry is selling. And, it's unfortunately a lot about greed and what sells and what can make the most money. And there's this disconnect between maybe what the evidence actually supports. Can you give me like just one example where you see that all the time that you find quite frustrating?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I have my own businesses, but I have worked for a very large sports, fitness, and leisure company for almost over 11 years. I did. And I ran a club, and I was overseeing a very large territory and eventually the entire United States in our company. And I think that man, I feel like I'm like bagging on this a lot, but it's just like it's just reality, and what I see, there's so many good things, but I think it's just this idea of greed you mentioned is such a big thing. And it's not just a fitness industry thing. I mean, it's a lot of
Yeah.
industries, it's like I think the disconnect for me is just a lack of integrity. It's and it's in
Yes.
mine was more inside of a very like private clubs, ship clubs, really high end luxury environments. But this is also pervasive in commercial clubs, whether they be from, the big Equinox, whether it's,
Yeah.
Gold's Gym, just the Spectrum Lifetime. It's really just a marketing campaign all the time. The big disconnect, it's all about marketing constantly and putting the people who are working in those environments in situations they don't want to be in. So you're taking people who have a love of helping people to get in better condition and feel better about themselves, and you put them into a model, into, again, a research study that is really poorly constructed. The methodology is garbage.
Yeah.
right? How we measure the results, horrible. The gaps in the research,
Yeah.
and so let's put you in a commercial club environment and let's kill your passion immediately for this. And let's make it all about
Yeah.
sales and let's pay you less
Hmm.
and let's have you sell things you don't believe in. I mean, what a terrible study, that compromised the
I know.
ethics of the person. And then they wonder why we are always losing people within 18 to 24 months. We have almost a complete turnover of newly
Hmm.
certified people. If the model doesn't change, how we design the study doesn't change, we're going to get the same result. And that's the disconnect.
Well, I couldn't agree with that more. I've seen, similar patterns in the UK. And, you're put in this position, maybe when you have a passion for just helping people to feel better about themselves, to be a salesperson or a manager, or a cleaner. And we all have those aspects to our roles in some respects. But when that's the predominant focus and that's not what you signed up for, you can't blame people for, leaving the industry. I'm curious, we talked a lot about kind of what is going wrong, and what the industry itself, the trainers, the clubs, certifications, professionalism of the industry, what needs to change. Kind of what would you say is working, and what really would be your first point to call out that we need to change or could do something about?
Yeah, I think what's working is this at least small shift into looking at well, not small, I would say a pretty nice shift into looking at mental health as being an important part of
Hmm.
health and well-being. And this is moving into more of the personal training realm and understanding that your work is so much bigger, expanding the scope of practice into mental health and well-being. So that's really working. The problem is we don't have the correct education to implement this to trainers currently. We need better informed, better educated folks. So again, it sounds like I'm bagging, but there's just a lot of holes to plug in this
You are.
industry.
Yeah.
It's like whack-a-mole right now. But I do think the future of the industry is a more holistic, almost shaman-based experience as a trainer. I think we have to move beyond, we have to transcend the physical portion of our work. I think that it's a good front door to walk into it, but it's not the house.
Hmm.
The house is all about the human for that.
The
And we
human.
we are starting to recognize that more, but we are woefully under educated for this. One of the best things that
Hmm.
happened to me was, I went to James Madison University for my bachelor's and master's degree, and very forward thinking institution. And during my bachelor's degree in my kinesiology and exercise leadership program, we were required to have basic counseling. I had a therapist during my education. It was required for
Wow.
the course
Wow. That's
to
incredible.
understand what it was like to actually work with people and understand the psychosocial elements of what it means, how people make decisions, the trauma they're dealing with. This was in the 90s when this happened.
I
I
think
mean, I
that's
was doing this.
incredible.
I mean, right? It should be a requirement to have basic counseling skills. I also had incredible legality work. I took sports and exercise legalities. We went over case law and studies. So I knew about the legal aspects of the business before I got in, whether it's running a club or being an independent contractor. But I think that was presented to me early, but I noticed that's not a thing in most places. So I realized that.
No.
And I think we're on the horizon. We could see the event horizon that this is really important. The whole human is really important, but we're not there in terms of the education. You know how I know? I teach in the academic environment at 3 different colleges, and I
Yeah.
teach certified personal trainer courses. And when I see students who come to these courses, they are primarily bodybuilding, very aesthetic
Yeah.
focused. They don't think
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
the human element, the psychosocial elements, because that's not what they're seeing on social media too. So you're fighting a fight within the industry and online, and so it's very difficult to overcome that kind of the tsunami of information that's telling people to look at videos that tell people to take this supplement, do this program. I mean, nothing drives me more crazy than when people tell me to look at a video of someone saying, "Do these 5 exercises." Like, what does that have to do with anything? Like, I haven't done an intake on you. I don't know what your risk stratification is. I don't know what your
Yeah.
risk factors are. It's pretty dangerous to just be saying do this, do that. But people are swayed by that stuff because it adheres to a quick fix mentality that honestly we may never get over. It's a big part of human nature.
Yeah. 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 Gosh, there's so much there. And, I think you're right. I think I've seen that shift as well, in terms of the mental health. But I think there's still this dichotomy between, okay, mental and physical over here. And, we want this whole human approach. And one thing I know we talked about before was like, I like to think of like, okay, indoor cycling as this little lab, that's kind of my favorite thing to teach. But when everyone walks in that door, like, I don't know their whole story and what they've come in with that day, their physical load, but also what they're carrying, mentally. We all come in with this mental baggage or this idea about fitness and our intention behind it, which I think is incredibly important. And I think in some ways, still the industry is focused on intention of, burning calories, or it's just this physical endeavor that we need to check off our list for the day to say that we've done exercise. When in reality, I try to get to the core of why everyone's there. And I think at the end of the day, we all just want to feel better about ourselves. We all just want to regulate our nervous system and feel calm and feel like we're accepted and okay in our bodies. And I think if that came across, that whole humanness, that if we could get that message across more broadly, I think things could change a little bit. But how do you sell that on a scale economically?
No way. I don't see it happening in that sense. I just think it's going to be tough. And I think one of the other thing is the people who are into fitness, like you and I, right? We've been doing a long time. We have a habit of well-being, and most people who have a habit of regular well-being over the course of a really long time are the minority. And the people in the
Absolutely.
minority assume that the people not in the minority are just like them. That why don't that's why I think we bring our confirmation bias into our work with clients,
Mhm,
because we think,
mhm,
oh, you
mhm.
know what, you want to be big, you want to be like super athletic, don't you? You want to be just like me. You bring your own confirmation bias in, and
Yeah.
realizing that most people are not you. They're not you. They're
Yeah.
never going to be you. They're never going to love it like you do. And they're just trying to show up. That's their main goal, because the thing that they failed at is being regular at it. You're there to help them become regular participant, not to reach the peak of their physical fitness.
Yeah.
That's not what they're there for. But we think that's because we want that
Yeah.
sometimes, and we want to do these
Yeah.
competitions and stuff. We
Yeah.
assign our own bias onto our clients, when really we should be the 80% of people who aren't exercising regularly don't want anything to do with being in a competition, getting big muscles, nothing. They just want to be there and have some semblance of feeling better.
Yeah, yeah, and just show up and get through the door. I mean, I like to remind people in the first 5 minutes of the warm up, for example, like you've already done the hardest part. You got through the door and you got here today, And I think when we present images, the industry used to look at a lot of the imagery, even, it's of people that are, strong, but really aesthetically, lean, or sports figures, and it's like I found in my own research, I'm sure as well, like people don't really find that as inspirational as they do maybe someone a little bit like them who might be, a little bit disabled or overweight that is more active than them, that's more inspiration. Oh, people like me can do this too. And I'm not sure if that message is coming across on an industry level.
Definitely not.
So yeah, that's
Not coming through.
and I think you picked up on social media already a little bit, but we know that kind of the social media and influencer culture have changed fitness. It sounds like you don't see it in the most favorable light already. Would you say there's anybody that's getting it right and who's getting it wrong?
I think I have a complicated relationship with this too. On my own
Hmm.
podcast, I've interviewed several influencers who have pretty large followings, and I found them to be wonderful people, really nice people. And I think that a lot of influencing, this is going to sound weird, is often a mistake. Like most of the people I've talked to, they're not really in the business. Like they made a video or two that got big, and they're almost now beholden to it. So they make some videos here and there, and but they're not getting the satisfaction of actually working with anyone. So I know a really big influencer who has over millions of subscribers on YouTube, Brianna Addison, very nice person, but I never forget her being on my podcast and saying, I can teach yoga in LA and have two or three people in my class. That's it. Like no one knows me, in real life, but online she's super famous and she has this following. But you're not really in the industry. You're just basically creating videos with no engagement with actual humans, and then you're just making videos, right? And I'm not saying anything's wrong with that, but I'm saying what I sense from people like her and others is that there's a sadness there of content creation
Mm,
without real connection, and
yeah,
content creation without connection is, I think is a difficult thing. And I think one lady I talked to, she said she was even thinking of getting out of content creation, and she makes a lot of money. She's just cause lonely.
yeah,
It's just like you wake
yeah,
up. You see these things and people will say, "Oh, what I eat in a day and all this stuff." It's actually a pretty lonely lifestyle. You're getting up,
Yeah.
you're basically a nomadic ghost. You just make videos, you're by yourself, you go to the gyms, you isolate yourself from other people. You put on these massive headphones, you have a camera looking at you. It's actually a pretty sad lifestyle.
Yeah.
Monetarily it may be nice, but you're not actually catering to what humans desire and need most, which is community and connection with
Yes.
others. So I actually think you're going to see a lot of people getting out of influencing in the future
Mhm.
because it doesn't feel good. But I do think I do like a lot of the yoga influencers because at least a lot of them have their 200 or 500 hour certification. I think, yoga, although it's still searching for even more legitimacy with certification, they at least
Yeah.
have something that's more
Yes,
legitimate.
absolutely.
And
Yeah.
they're often very much, they'll put it on their profile, a 200 hour, whatever. So they have done some education and things of that nature with it. I think fitness is who's doing it right in terms of just exercise. I don't know. I think that it's hard to know. I'm not on social media per se. I mean, like I don't have TikTok. I don't have Facebook, I don't have any of that stuff because it just doesn't serve me. I've never needed it.
Yeah.
I had
Yeah.
it like 8, 9 years ago. I got rid of it immediately because I thought this is a waste of time. As a scientist, this
Yeah.
does nothing for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
like, and as a
Yeah.
human behavior wise, I knew it was a trap. It was a thirst trap. And I
Yeah.
said, no,
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
someone who studies human behavior, I know what this leads to, a thirst trap. And I don't want to be a part of that. I do
Yes.
like YouTube just because for my podcast, I enjoy that YouTube has a lot of ways to learn. You can learn quite a few.
Yes.
Actually, I learned how to cut my own hair on YouTube. I said
Wow,
I
that's
learned how to do
incredible.
that
Wow, it
on
looks
YouTube.
great. I think I need to learn. I
Yeah.
need one to
But
watch
that
YouTube
also
after
was a
this,
trap too. Yeah.
and then I'm gonna blame you.
YouTube can be a time trap for things and can lead you down rough pathways. But I don't know. I don't look at a lot of fitness influencers, honestly. I think so much of it is based off of just misinformation and trying to get clicks and things like that. So I don't know. I mean, there may be people out there doing it well, but honestly, I'm too busy. I spend a lot of time working, like
Yeah.
with people.
Yeah,
It's
I
hard to
know.
know. Unless I interview them, on my podcast, I'm not spending a huge amount of time scrolling on that type of stuff.
Yeah, I mean yeah, I think that's really an honest answer. And both of us kind of grew up probably right before the internet was a thing. And then Facebook was only for people in university. And, I kind of stopped at
Hmm.
Instagram and, I'm kind of in that applied space as well. I've really struggled with, okay, I can't promote myself full time online. I don't like that idea of doing that, but, I know that it's a way to grow your profile, but it sits really uncomfortable with me. And, I've noticed as well that mostly the academics that I follow or work with, they might be the best scientists, but their social media is not that great. But so the social media is not a sign of an individual's credibility, yet many young and vulnerable, impressionable people look at it and they say, oh, they have the body that I would like to have. So therefore, I'm going to look at what they do because then I will have that like a exact formula. And we know that they're lonely, they're spending hours doing this, and that might not even be what they're doing to present those results they're presenting to the individual watching their content.
Yeah, yeah, most definitely. I just think that most things are not what you think they are. If you
Hmm.
really dive in deep, I think that's one of the great things about science. Science requires you to have an hypothesis, right? Conduct a study. What are the results? What are the gaps in it? And I think if you just pay attention and you spend time looking deeper into things, it's usually not what you think it is. And
Yeah.
a lot of people do themselves a disservice by not looking deeper into the things that they're into.
Hmm.
I think it's a real issue with study, as two academics here, and study has been a part of our lives, right? You study, you ask questions, you inquire,
Yeah.
you look deeper, you find more research. You look at, well, it's one of the things that drives me crazy, Natalie. If someone tells me, well, this study said this, I'm like, one study doesn't mean
Yeah.
anything to
Yeah.
me. I was like,
Yeah.
one
Yeah.
study.
Same.
So who
Exactly.
funded
Yeah.
who funded the study? What's
Funded
the
the study. You tell me
methodology?
that. Yeah.
What's the
Yeah.
methodology? What's the hypothesis? What is the sample size? Fitness
Yeah. Where was it conducted?
fitness research studies are infamous for having low sample sizes, self-reported measures, but then
And low.
someone takes it and goes, "Oh, this is now what we should be doing." I'm like, "That's one study." I'm like, "Give me the
Exactly.
meta-analysis of
Yeah.
this. What's the
What's the
longitudinal
follow up?
research?" Like, what's the follow-up? What are the gaps in it? Was it just
Yeah.
done for untrained populations? Was it trained populations? Was it only
Yeah.
this demographic of people. What age were the people they were doing it? Was it elderly people, middle age? No one
Yeah,
does that.
yeah,
And no one
yeah,
does that unless
yeah.
you're an academic or have had the background. So anybody
I know,
that
I
sends me
know.
a study, I'm like, listen, you send me this study, I'm
Exactly.
going to break it apart and I'm going to tell you
Yeah,
whether it's good or not. And no one does that.
yeah,
That's a big problem.
yeah, yeah. Or they, yeah, absolutely. Critical thinking. I think, those are two very big skills that maybe we should be focusing on is critical thinking, human skills, and those interpersonal skills. And, the personal training and the exercise physiology, when we're teaching those qualifications, is secondary. I don't want to say secondary, but, these things need to happen first, in my opinion, before you can even get to the other aspects of training. And, that critical thinking piece, that's not just an issue with our industry alone.
Yes.
So, yeah, there's a lot there. Gosh, there's so much I would just love to pick up and have a much longer conversation on. But I just have a couple more questions for today, if that's okay. And I feel like there's some follow up later at some point. So, I know that you're a behavior scientist as well. We know that behavior change is a huge part of our industry. And, a lot of behavior change comes from marketing. Behavior science comes from marketing and economics. So I think that's where it gets really interesting. But it's at the heart of what our industry should be doing. But most fitness ignores kind of the essence of, we'll just say human behavior, because I know that's what you're really passionate about and what people don't know about. So, do you think the industry is capable of changing this, or are we just kind of stuck?
My honest answer about this, no, I don't, I'm not sure. I'm going to say no. I'm going to stick with that answer. I think depends on who's in charge, actually. And I think the people who are in charge, and what I mean, let me operationalize who's in charge here. Another scientist thing, right? Let me operationalize these
Yeah,
definitions.
yeah, you're going to operationalize it.
Right. Who's in charge now? So, if this is when you're looking on a club level, who's in charge? The GM of the club, the owner of the club, or in down to, let's say, the fitness manager, general manager. The reason why I say no is because we have a massive leadership debt. What is occurring. So most people, generally most overseers of clubs and managers of clubs are not very good at their job. And we know this through tremendous data. We have tremendous data on this through Gallup, which has been doing this research related to leadership in any profession. This is not just fitness, this is all professions.
Yeah,
For the last, I think, 30, 40 years, Gallup has been conducting this. We know that 1 out of every 10 manager, leader, owner of a facility is a transcendent leader. That means 10% of the people who are in clubs environments or any management environment overseeing it are people you would run through a wall for. They change lives. They're incredible people. 2 out of 10 managers and
yeah,
people who are
yeah, yeah,
overseeing
yeah,
leadership are good at their job. They're good.
yeah,
That means 70% of people who are overseeing the industry and management leadership roles should not be in these roles or are really bad at their job. If you looked at that research wise, that is a slam dunk for failure right there. So
yeah.
we don't have the right leaders. We don't have the right people. And then we often hire
Hmm.
poorly. We elevate, let's say, the best trainer on the floor to become the leader of other trainers,
Hmm.
usually a big mistake. We don't have any idea if this person has great human skills with other people. They're great at selling and working with their clients, but can they lead other people? Most leaders are pretty bad at identifying this. And this has been a constant problem over the last 30, 40 years. Upward mobility for people who should not be doing this. I'll tell you another reason I see this too, as someone who also has had a consulting business in this and done headhunting and hired for other companies. And tons of people who apply for management leadership jobs are woefully underqualified and have no business applying for these types of jobs. But a lot of people who do the hiring, they overlook this. They don't look at the human skill for that. And I'm always very honest with people during the hiring process. If I think they're not qualified, I tell them to their face, I go, this is not a good job for
Yeah.
you. You shouldn't be leading other people. And you know what they say? Thank you for telling me that. I appreciate you being honest
Yes.
with me.
Yes.
I've said it to employees I've had in the past. I didn't think they were transcendent leaders. They shouldn't be leading other people. I think that's the job, to be honest with
Hmm.
people and be transparent. So,
Hmm.
and working back, do I think that will make this change behaviorally? Probably not, because we have a terrible leadership debt. And as long as we keep making the same mistakes in our leadership ecosystem, we're going to get the same result. It's a guarantee. that's going to happen.
Just like if you set up the research study in the same way or it's poorly run, you're going to get the same results. Coming back to you're seeing this as a poorly run research study. And, I see this, not like you said, it's not just in the fitness industry. You see it in the academic industry all the time. People might have the technical
Exactly.
knowledge, fantastic technical knowledge, academic knowledge, and they're promoted and promoted and promoted, but they lack the human skills. And gosh, I don't think that's a problem that we can solve on the industry wide level. Um, and yeah, I'm not sure of a solution because I think, like you said, some of it comes from these traits that the individual has, selecting the correct individuals. Could we do a better job of embedding a leadership skills, or would some of that come from the human skills that you think are lacking in the existing certification standards? I don't know, but yeah,
Yeah.
I think you are doing the right thing by being honest with people.
Yeah, and I think that's part of my role is being honest with people, and it's not all doom and gloom. It's not like I'm sitting here just nailing the industry. I'm actually doing
No,
things,
no, I know you're not
creating mentorship
doing the same.
programs, working in
Yeah,
college system to help
yeah,
bring usher in a new
yeah,
type of fitness professional who has better education and is getting the realism about what it's like to be in the industry, presenting at conferences, speaking what's actually happening out there, having an academic yet practitioner mindset. So I want the audience to recognize that I may be super critical of the industry, but I'm not someone just barking at it. I do something about it on a regular basis. In
yeah.
my corner, I'd work really hard to try to make the change. And it's one thing to criticize; it's another thing to criticize and do nothing. That's not acceptable
And
to me.
you
If
offer
you're going to
solutions. Yeah.
criticize, you need to have a solution. Have always been working for solutions my entire career. It's still frustrating because it feels like it doesn't make a huge difference, but I'll keep fighting. And I think we have some really great movement coming on, at least on a small way, to try to continue to try to change things. But I think my existence in the industry and the jobs that I have are part of that solution. And that's one thing, like I dig on the fitness industry, but you talked about academia. Academia has a lot of problems too. And
Whew.
anybody who works in academia knows it's a dinosaur system that doesn't change very
Yes.
quickly. And we
No.
need more practitioners working in the academic environment. We need more people who actually grind their teeth in fitness to
Mhm.
teach
Mhm. Mhm.
undergraduate
Mhm.
and graduate courses and direct these students for that. We need to make like things like personal training attractive to graduate students and not just going
Yes.
into becoming a physical therapist because that's a better paying job. I think what I do as
Yeah.
a personal trainer is one of the greatest jobs ever created. I'm
Absolutely.
not just
Yeah.
joking because unlike the doctor, you don't see your doctor that often. Okay.
Yeah.
Your physical therapist, you see them for a very limited amount of time in rehab.
Mhm.
You see me
Mhm.
every week for years and years and years. You don't see your hairdresser that often. You may see them
No,
once,
I know.
5 or 6
Especially if
weeks,
you're
right?
cutting your own hair now, Darian.
Right. I don't even have to do that anymore. But you're seeing your trainer or your group X instructor every single week, multiple times a week. Whose job's more important? Right? You're
Yeah,
getting
I know.
constant contact with people.
Yeah.
So we have the privilege of doing an incredibly amazing job. I honestly think it's one of the best things that's ever been created. But we have to hold that in our hand very loosely and recognize that we need to do better
Yeah.
for that because as great as the job is,
Mm.
it's one of the worst turnover jobs. It has some of the highest satisfaction scores and the highest turnover. That's a problem. People love it, but they can't stay in it. We
Yeah.
got to do better than that.
Exactly. Yeah. 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 Gosh, well, there's so much I agree with and want to pick up on. And one is that, having the more applied practitioners in the academic space. And that's one thing that the accrediting body that I worked for in the UK, SIMSPA, really appreciated about the work that we were doing. A lot of people saw what I did, teaching fitness classes and doing personal training alongside my academic work or degree as it's not related. But for me, that's the living laboratory. That's that human side of things that keeps the evidence grounded in real experience and keeps me fresh with what is going on. And, I think that, should not be looked over. And the other thing you mentioned around how, you think it's the most valuable role out there, what could be more important, yet the society doesn't see it as that. And I think until the standards, like you said, are systemized and we have full professionalization of the industry, how is society going to uphold those standards for seeing what we do as important? I mean, to me, it is the ultimate privilege of getting to know these people. And I similarly stepped out. I left academia in the UK. I came over here, and that's the reason I was saddest to leave, was the relationship that I built with those people. So I don't think that we get that message across, the work that you're changing lives. It's not just about their body physically.
Yeah. I mean, you're literally developing, if you do it well, you're in a serial relationship with many people over many years. And you're having maybe the most impact outside of their family on the person because of the amount of contact time you have with them. You're doing something very vulnerable with them. There's very few professions that do that, very few that have such meaning like that. So we need to take it more seriously. We need to have fun, but we need to like take it more
Yeah.
seriously. And it has to start at the ground level. And so I think a big part for me is like, I always wanted to be an academic and a practitioner, to be an example of like, when I teach my students, I'm not just telling them, oh, this would be a great profession to be in. Like, no, by the way, I was doing this before I showed up to class. I was doing this. I can
Yeah.
tell you
Yeah.
what it's
Yeah. Yeah.
actually
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
to do this
Yeah.
and to
Yeah.
do it well
Yeah.
over a long period of time. And I think there's just a massive disconnect between the academic and practitioner part. And then once you're just a practitioner, also too, it's just then you're fighting the corporate battle and the messaging battle, the marketing battle
Yeah.
of all the forces of corporations and social media, which may not ever be won. But change starts with small
Yeah.
pebbles, and everyone has to have solutions. But I think also while you're having solutions, you need to be critical. It's okay to be critical of
Yeah.
something you
Yeah.
love.
Yeah.
I just think we
Yeah.
started with that.
Yeah.
It's okay. When whether you're in a relationship with someone, whether it's friendship, whether it's romantic, whether it's family, you got to be honest with people and be critical.
I know.
One of the things I love most about my wife is she checks me. If I'm like overstating
Yeah.
something, or I'm not doing, I should have a different perspective, she'll tell me. She's honest with me. I don't want to, be with someone who's a
That's what you
pushover.
want.
And I think a lot of times, a lot of
No.
people in the industry, they're pushovers. They just go with the flow. Oh, I'm just working.
Yeah.
I just go back and forth. I just exist in the
Yeah.
industry.
Not
I
gonna
don't do
challenge
anything.
anything.
Why? You
Yeah.
need to be an
Yeah.
advocate
Yeah.
for the industry.
Yeah.
You need to like be
Yeah.
critical
Yeah.
of the industry, be for it, but also be critical of it too.
Absolutely. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. And, this podcast isn't just about exercise. Wellness in the real world is not just a buzzword to me. It's like, what does this really mean? What does wellness and well-being, and what does it really mean on the day to day? How does evidence fit with the real world? And part of that is social, part of that is relationships. And, like your relationship with your wife, that's healthy, checking each other. And we need a healthier relationship with the fitness industry instead of a poorly run research study. I think that is key. And similarly, I've been in situations where I've asked, why have we always done it this way? And I think that's a question that I find really frustrating, that people don't ask enough. Well, why have we always done it this way? Oh, this is the way we've always done it. Or I don't want to challenge anything. Well, you can challenge things, but you can also offer solutions. And I know that you are challenging things and you're critical because you care about the industry, as a whole, and you want it to be better.
Most
So
definitely.
I have so much more I would love to dive into, but I know that your time is limited. One last question, because I didn't get to explore all the wonderful solutions, part of your mentorship program, everything you're offering. Can you tell me a little bit more about, maybe one of those things that you are doing to help change, or where people can go to find out more information about all your wonderful initiatives that you're working?
Yeah, I think the easiest thing to connect with me is just through my website, drdarianparker.com, or through my podcast. You can get that anywhere on my YouTube. And my YouTube's a very academic YouTube, so we actually go over research studies, like really reputable, valid research studies, and I bring on really
Excellent.
reputable, credentialed scientists, researchers, to make sure we're getting the best information possible. And then, mentorship's always been a part of my life. I believe in giving back and helping people, because we're only as good as the people we help, I think. So hopefully to have some really great news in the future coming up here about mentorship, more formalized, and working with certification organizations to decrease that knowledge to work gap. That is a real big problem. We're one of the industries where we don't have a practicum requirement. We don't have any experiential learning requirement. So I'd like to help change that particularly.
Absolutely. Well, I couldn't agree with you more on that. Gosh, there's so much. I appreciate your time and your honesty. And that's really what I was hoping to hear from you today. And I hope that we can follow up sometime. So thank you so much for your time. And I hope that, we can speak again soon, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
You too, Natalie. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye. Wow. Thank you, Darian, so much for your time and honesty. It was exactly the conversation that I wanted to have today. Before we wrap up, I just wanted to say that if this conversation landed for you, I wrote a piece last week called When the Data Tells on You. It's about what happens when your own activity data starts telling a story you don't want to hear, and how periodization, training load, and behavior change evidence on self-compassion all turned out to be the same conversation. It's something I'm really passionate about, something I would have loved to pick up more on today with Darian, because, sometimes even us as scientists and exercise professionals, we see the data and, we have a feeling about it, and we need to be able to critically unpick that data, because sometimes, we're missing the whole context. So I talk more about that. It's on Substack. There's a link in the show notes. It's the same theme, it's a different angle. To everyone listening, if this resonated, the best thing you can do is share it with someone who might find it useful. Please leave a rating or review when you listen and let me know what landed for you. We're just getting started with this podcast and there's a lot more to come. You can find me on LinkedIn or Instagram, or just reply to my newsletter on Substack at drnataliegrunwalds.substack.com. Wellness in the real world is really about bringing the evidence-based wellness to life, for real life people. Thank you so much for being a part of this, and I'll see you next time.